Good evening, this is What's Going On. I'm Jon Li. Our guest this evening is Brett Li, Davis City Council member and a candidate for re-election in the June election. Brett, I want to thank you for being on our show.
Oh, well, thanks for inviting me, John.
For sure.
I always like hanging out with you.
Well, we'll see where it goes. The city council race is just, the race has just started. The candidates' final filing date just closed. So there are 4 people, 2 incumbents and 2 newcomers running for 3 seats. So 3 out of the 4 people who are candidates will be elected, 1 person will not. Brett's been on our show before, so tonight I'm going to divide the show kind of into thirds. The first third will be about what he does at work and what I know about how that particular business got started and how important it is in your life. And secondly, we'll be talking about where Brett went to school at Berkeley. He studied in engineering about management science and operations research. He studied that in college. I studied it in grad school long before he did. I have a friend who's studying it now. It's relevant to talking about the management of the city of Davis. And I think that out of that discussion, you'll get an idea of some of the challenges that the city is facing. Third, we'll be talking about some of the specific issues. And then I'll be talking about the election. So Brett, start out with, you've got a new job.
I do, yeah. I started about a year ago working for Farm Fresh to You, which is the delivery side of KP Organic. Basically, we make CSA-like boxes of community-supported agriculture type of boxes of fresh organic produce from the area and deliver it actually to a person's doorstep. So it's a little bit different than the traditional CSA model where you actually go to a central location and pick up your box of produce.
And how often do you get your box?
I get one every week. Mine shows up sometime between Monday night and Tuesday morning. The delivery elves drop off the box, and in the morning on Tuesday I get up and it's at my doorstep.
So what's it like? What happens in the box? What's in the box?
So the majority of the produce comes from our farm in Capay, the Capay Valley. But it's supplemented by some organic farms in Southern California and also in the Monterey area, and mainly to provide some variety. So in the wintertime, it's you'd probably get tired of just eating oranges, well, you don't get tired of eating oranges every week, but in your box wouldn't seem that interesting if you just opened it up and there were oranges and that's it. So we make use of some partner organic farms and make use of some of their items to round out the variety. But the farm in Capay actually provides a wide variety of produce. It's pretty impressive. It almost looks like an oversized garden in terms of you look out and you see different things being planted and different things being grown, as opposed to, I think, the more traditional type of farm. Traditional is the wrong word, actually. In the traditional sense, traditional farms used to be more like this model, but the more sort of modern, farm with the giant, blocks of land all planted in one crop. This is a nice contrast to that. So you look and you can actually look and go, oh, this is, growing over there and this is growing over here, and it is interesting because it is such a contrast. I think most of my life growing up, I'm used to the model, which I think is shifting, which is, here's 200 acres and we plant all one crop. And what's interesting is just through simple farming techniques, you're able to greatly reduce the need for pesticides and things like that. Obviously the farm is organic, so it doesn't make use of pesticides like the traditional farms, well, the conventional farms do. But just, you plant every couple, within different crops, you plant a little strip of just sort of just cover crop, which attracts the beneficial insects, and they sort of are there, and it helps sort of take care of a variety of the issues that I think most conventional farms sort of rely on heavy pesticide use. And it's a more sustainable model. So it's kind of fun doing that. I mean, as you know from my last time I was here, I had worked with FedEx as an industrial engineer for close to 20 years. There were about 4 years there where I was a business planner at the headquarters in Memphis, but lion's share was as an industrial engineer for FedEx. And now I work as a process improvement engineer for Farm Fresh to You.
So you did grad school at the London School of Economics, and it was in labor management relations at the shop floor.
Industrial relations, yes. Yeah.
So how do you use your education in terms of your day-to-day professional activity now as an engineer?
So we might have talked about this before, and at the risk of boring your viewers, engineering, at least at the industrial engineering level and operations research level, tends to make this simplification, and the simplification is that people can be modeled similar to a machine. So we look at an assembly line or a conveyor belt, and the conveyor belt moves at 15 feet per second, and a person can make 27 widgets per hour, and we want to have a certain throughput, and we just kind of crunch the numbers and you get an answer. As I went and did an internship, it was an internship at McDonnell Douglas, at Douglas Aircraft in Torrance, California. Their main assembly plant was in Long Beach, but I was in a fabrication plant in Torrance. But I spent a summer there and quickly realized that not every person is quite as easy to model as just a simple equation or even a complex equation. There was much more to it. And I did that between my junior and senior year. And in my senior year at Berkeley, I took industrial sociology and industrial relations. And from that, I got a better sense of the complexity around planning and analyzing organizations and processes. And I think one of the things that my colleagues in the engineering area missed out on was taking courses like that. So essentially, and it kind of rings true to people. This is not advanced physics or something like that, but sometimes people are pissed off. They're angry, right? And so maybe the person who makes 27 widgets per hour makes 30 per hour, but there's a higher defect rate. Because before we were saying 27 widgets per hour and some number have a defect. Maybe they're hungover, so they are making 20 widgets per hour. Maybe I don't like you and we're sitting next to each other on the assembly line and there's some big issue. Or maybe they're upset about their wages. So the 27 per hour kind of goes out the window. And
I think what you're saying is really relevant to being a council member. Okay, that was my whole point.
Okay.
That I think we've gotten into the second subject. I mean,
Sure.
I sort of forced the point, but you went into your graduate education. That led you to talking about the weaknesses in your undergraduate education. Yep. So I'm just going to clarify that again. I'm embarrassed that it took me so long to find management science in my brain, but I studied it in grad school, and at that point, which was 20 years before you were an undergraduate, those formulas were being developed.
Yes.
And they were being developed on the shop floor, and they were being developed by scientists who were coming in, and some of them were doing work study labor, yes. But some of them were doing what I'm proposing, which is operations research, and we'll get more into that in a little bit. But I want to finish about KPay first.
Sure.
But my point is that we're talking about management. We're talking about public policy. We're talking about how decisions are made that affect lots of people's lives and how organizations can work effectively. And those things are what the city council should be focused on, I believe.
Yeah. Actually, one of the things, so I have a certificate in workplace health and safety from UC Davis. And it reminds me of it's a slight tangent, but I'm reminded of a class, and we took industrial hygiene. And we're given these case studies because you take this class and you can go and work. A lot of people end up working for UC Davis, making sure the labs are safe and things like that. But they give you this question. You're cleaning parts that are greasy, and you're using this solvent, and it gives off these fumes that are toxic. What should you do? And immediately, a lot of people just tilt over to well, you need a fume hood, right? I mean,
certainly where my mind went.
So in every chemistry lab you've been in, since an undergrad, there's some fume hood, and when you mix these two things together, make sure you wear your goggles and your gloves, and you're in the fume hood. And then, well, how big does this fume hood need to be if the size of the parts, and where do you dry these items? So you might clean them with some sort of brush because they're oily and greasy, and then, but it's sort of a trick question, at least that's sort of the intent of creating these actual case studies. We just jump into the engineering solution. And really the correct approach is to take that step back and go, well, why are these things getting greasy? And for simple grease, why are you using something highly toxic? Because you have, orange peel, extracts that can clean greasy things and are non-toxic. You don't have to worry about a fume hood. I mean, you should see the elaborate things we're drawing and oh my gosh, this part is so giant, and tens of thousands of dollars. And instead of buying toxic, degreaser, you just buy the orange peel extract and you're good. And it's sometimes we kind of get lost in kind of that approach. And if you just take that step back, you're talking about the farming. I've been pretty impressed. You look and go, wow, you just grow this cover crop that attracts these beneficial insects, and they're over here, and the crop you're trying to protect is over here, but just through kind of the natural movement of the insects, the beneficial insects kind of drift over there a little bit. They love this plant, but they'll go over there and eat some of the other unwanted sort of items. And you're like, wow, such a simple, easy to think of thing. But I think a lot of times we're just so conditioned into, here is something we don't like, let me go buy something that will kill it. Kind of like the little lady who swallowed a fly, right? Then she does a spider, and then you kind of keep going, and it just gets a little bit crazy and out of control. And then the next thing you know, you have chemicals going into the groundwater, run off and then down into the groundwater, and suddenly people are worried about their water supply because of some of the chemicals that in many cases were unnecessary to use in the first place.
Operations research, to me, is what we need to do with the city of Davis now. So I'm advocating that we have a new general plan, that we apply the management science tools that you learned in college and actually reevaluate everything it is that the city of Davis is doing. Okay, I'm done. Now we can move on. So the rest, that was almost everything I wanted to say.
Okay.
So you said the Nishi property, the Mace Ranch property. I said trackside. You said the cannery.
So John is going over just some of the things we thought we might talk about at some point. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And I think there were a few others that.
Well, we'll get there, but that's my first catch was on economic development and development. I think economic development is a lot more than just land, but.
Yes. So, it's funny, and, I'll just say it, that a lot of people are led to believe that Davis must grow to survive. And their idea of grow is the rather simplistic idea of growth, which is growing on our periphery. I don't believe that to be true. If we take that step back and we think about how do we, provide good jobs, how do we increase city revenues, and I'll probably should touch on that a little bit, why that's an important thing, and how do we make our community sustainable. This idea that we need to grow our city revenues, people, if you look at it in kind of a sort of narrow lens, it's sort of like, oh, well, there's the council wanting to get more tax money from us, and at some level that's true. But it's also important to really point out that the state and the federal government have completely abdicated responsibility for many things that they used to take care of. So for instance, there's been this sort of back and forth with Jerry Brown and the Assembly over some transportation funds to help take care of local and county roads. There used to be a lot more money available. Right now, essentially nothing. And the city is left to pick up the pieces. I think the most stark example is what we saw not too long ago with the school system, where the state just sort of said, hey, you guys figure it out. We don't have enough money, and we're going to, that money that we promised the schools and we had been giving to the schools, we're going to take away. For the city, it's a little bit different, but there are similarities. And so we're kind of caught in this position where we are having to take on more responsibilities that traditionally we would have had assistance with from the state and from the federal government. So right now, we should be paying about $8 million a year towards road repair and maintenance. We are currently paying $4 million. When I first took office, we were paying zero, essentially. So we've come a pretty long way, given the fact that our general fund budget is $45 million a year. So of that, the fact that $4 million is going towards roads, and we used to have essentially zero, that's a good thing. But we still have a shortfall. So the citizens were generous enough to pass a slight increase in the sales tax, and it's made a real difference. As we look forward in time, I don't think we should really be relying on sales tax measures or parcel tax measures to fund all the city's infrastructure needs. So there is a pressure to sort of grow. But the growth can be smart. So for instance, there's a group that some of the viewers may be familiar with called Davis Gig. And it's this idea that perhaps the city helps cover the cost of a fiber optic infrastructure so that the citizens and businesses will have fast, relatively inexpensive internet access. I can say that when I've been involved with site selection for work, one of the things we look at is what's the internet connectivity? Is it fast? And if somebody says, oh, we've got fiber optic, we're like, awesome, like A+. Many of the people in Davis, myself included, we pay a fairly large amount of money for a not very fast, reliable connection. And I don't mean to be disrespectful of the entities that provide that service, but it's very similar today as it was 5 or 6 years ago. In terms of technology, the world is moving and we're not. And so this would be an example that when we think economic development, we think of growth, helping our city become stronger. Stuff like that makes a difference, because what you do then is you have the opportunity for higher value-added enterprises to locate within Davis. We don't want to be kind of the lowest common denominator location where people just build low-tech things with low value-added. So there's that in terms of growth. There's also this idea of mixed use, residential, commercial, residential, retail in our downtown core area. As we've seen a few nice buildings go in that I think are keeping with the sensibilities of Davis, and they add value to our community. Personally, I think so. This now is probably a good time to take a little detour and talk about trackside, because when people hear me talk about that, then they think, oh, well, then obviously you support trackside. I don't support trackside as currently proposed. I'm a big believer in zoning, and I'm a big believer in respecting the current zoning, and then if we are to change zoning, it's done in a comprehensive, thoughtful way. What we have proposed right now, well, I think they met last night and they might be revising their proposal, but up until a couple days ago, the trackside proposal was for a fairly tall 6-story building in a neighborhood of 1- and 2-story buildings. And the current zoning for that parcel is 3 stories. And so I don't believe that we have this sort of binary choice, which is do nothing or accept 6 stories. It's currently a 1-story, the building there is 1 story. If you went from 1 story to 3 stories, as it's currently zoned, you would be increasing density, you would be doing infill, there would be a bunch of positive benefits, and it would be less impactful to the current neighbors. So I think it is important not just to sort of ignore the zoning. I think the zoning is a good signal to the the community as to what we think is appropriate, and it's meant to be done in a thoughtful, comprehensive manner. So one of the things I've had kind of a problem with is how a lot of the proposals come to us are sort of these one-off individual sorts of asks, and we're asked to change the zoning on a specific parcel. I think the much better approach is to look and over time, since the general plan, how have things changed? Should heights be different or should they not be different? And if we do want to go up, where should that be? I personally think the downtown could be, we could have more 3-story and 4-story buildings. And when I say 4 stories, I mean something about the height of the Chen building. To me, that's kind of a good kind of reference point. And does that mean I want everything to be 3 stories and 4 stories? Absolutely not. But I think what we don't want is this notion of, oh, we're going to do 7 or 8, or it has to be exactly as is.
Sproul Hall is 9. That's the tallest building in Yolo County.
Okay.
So there's a building on 4th Street where, because Chuck Rowe understood the rules so well, he got 3.5 stories, 4th and F. That's the tallest building, I believe, in the city.
4th and F.
It's a brown building.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. I'm familiar with that. Yeah.
Sure.
I think PG&E had a local drop your bill off location there at some point.
Well, but the point is, he's got a mezzanine between the 1st and 2nd floor that makes it really 3.5. And he's very upfront about that and says it's completely compliant with the city downtown requirements.
Yeah. So, so we were talking.
Go ahead.
Just about
any more about trackside and then move on.
Oh, just. I think that taking that step back is quite reasonable to do, and I would say that one of the things, one of the votes that I regret being confronted with, and it was really due to the timing of the item coming before us, was we had a chance. It was called MACE 391. Basically, the council was given a decision. You either put this parcel in permanent ag easement and get several $1 millions for that from grant money from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, or build on it. And there was some developer there who had kind of, look, here's a big check. I'm like Ed McMahon, we're going to make millions. And you're sort of, do I do A, do I do B? Do I do A, do I do B? And we literally, I asked for more time. I said, can't we have a little more time to evaluate this? And no, we have to decide by Friday, and this is the only council meeting we can have before Friday, and if we don't decide, we're going to lose the money from the USDA from putting into ag easement. So there's this time pressure. That's kind of ridiculous. And really, if I had to do it all over again, I would have taken the 391 acres. This is a little east of Mace Boulevard, a little east of the currently proposed Mace Innovation Center. I would have split it in half and put the easternmost portion in permanent ag easement, and I would have kept the other 200 acres for the city. And right now we're being told that we need more expansion space for our businesses, and this is what's driving sort of the Mace Innovation Center. One of the things that I think the residents are rightfully skeptical or suspicious of is sort of, promises of developers. And I think people instinctually, and also from practical experience, know that when a lot of these benefits accrue, they apply to the developer, not necessarily the community. So we had the cannery development. I believe that ConAgro walked away with big bags of money and went off to their headquarters and left the citizens of Davis just to deal with the current cannery project. If the city actually owned the parcel that an innovation park was suggested to be on, we would control it. And any benefits that accrued would go to the citizens of Davis. The way it is now is we have private landowners who come before the council and will eventually perhaps go before the voters, and they ask us to change the designation of the land from ag to residential or ag towards commercial. And there is a vast increase in the value of that property with the change of the zoning designation. That increase in value goes to the developer. Whereas if the city had that parcel, and the city is not exempt from Measure JR, if the city went and said, hey, you know, should we change the zoning of this from ag to commercial? When that land value goes up, that's part of the city, and it benefits all the community. It benefits, you know, everyone who lives here in terms of the increase in value. And the city is the one in the driver's seat. So when the developer starts to tilt off in a direction that we don't like, we have full control. And so I'm not sure exactly how we got on this topic, but that is one vote that I really feel like that was a missed opportunity, because a lot of my concern about the presently proposed Mace Ranch Innovation Center has to do with not knowing how things are going to unfold over the next 10 to 20 years. And if the city had actually owned that parcel, we would do what, you know, I would hope that we would do what we think is best for the community, and the community would share in the increased value and the benefits from having businesses located in Davis directly, rather than indirectly or being predicated on us writing a real rock-solid developer agreement. So, you know, right now you have to write an excellent developer agreement to anticipate what might happen 10 to 20 years down the line, whereas if the city owns the parcel, hey, we're in control.
Just so you understand that while this isn't a conventional idea, and there are lots of things to talk about it later and with other people that will be more invested in what you just said than I am, I want to point out that the major shopping center in Fairfield is partly owned by the city of Fairfield.
Okay.
And the city of Fairfield gets a cut on the profits every year from the shopping center. So it's kind of mind-jarring to think about the public sector being in the private sector and accruing the benefit of the increase due to the zoning. But there are so many other issues that are tangential to that it's just an interesting idea that other people are going to want to talk to you about.
Sure.
Anything else about the cannery?
I think we missed an opportunity there.
Okay.
I think in contrast to Nishi.
Okay, well, why don't we move on to Nishi?
So Nishi was an interesting negotiation process between the city and the developer. And I felt that there was a substantial amount of movement on the developer's part. I think in large part because they know ultimately it will go before the voters. So it's not just them trying to get 3 council members to vote yes, it's working with the council to come up with something that they think they can live with, but also has a good chance of succeeding at the ballot. And I was initially opposed to Nishi. I didn't think that, you know, right now, Richards and Olive, that intersection is very impacted.
It's where I live.
So this, you know, we recently approved the hotel conference center there, which will go in where Cafe Italia is and the one-story hotel there. So there's going to be some additional traffic impacts. And so this idea that we would have Nishi come in and also feed into that intersection at Olive and Richards, like how on earth, why on earth would we do that? So the developer did something which caught me by surprise. And it really highlighted, I think, the difference in process between how we handled that versus the cannery. I voted no on the cannery, and I voted no on the cannery CFD. We can get into that in a little bit. But what the developer proposed for Nishi is that they will not take occupancy of that site in terms of the people who live there or the people who work there until 2 things happen. One is that Caltrans completes the construction of a new Richards interchange off the highway, Interstate 80 going to Richards. So they're planning to completely redo the off-ramps and on-ramps there. And, so it's not an and or, it's an and, the university and Nishi complete a grade-separated access point to the university from the Nishi parcel. And what I mean by grade-separated is basically an underpass under the existing rail line. So Nishi, for people who don't really know where it is, it's very close to the Mondavi Center. If you were to get on the freeway at Richards, headed towards San Francisco, it's on your right-hand side. There's this narrow sort of sliver of land.
It's the land between you and the Mondavi Center.
Yes, it's bounded by Interstate 80 and the railroad, the Amtrak line. Anyway, so the developer said, we will not occupy that parcel until those two big infrastructure things get completed. And the city is not required to pay for them. The city, if the university drags its feet, then Nishi doesn't get built for a while. If the Caltrans drags its feet, then Nishi doesn't get built for a while. In addition, the developer agreed to put some caps on the amount of traffic going on and off site of the Nishi parcel in terms of there's going to be a parking garage there. So they've agreed to cap the number of peak hour trips. And they're able to do that by using some congestion pricing models. So when you go in and out of the lot, if they find that there's too much traffic going in and out, what they can do is they can charge varying amounts at different parts of the day, kind of like they do with the Bay Bridge. So it used to be in the Bay Bridge, you pay your $1 and you go across, didn't matter whether it was 2 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon. Now they've changed the pricing to reflect, they kind of want to discourage you from going during peak commute hours and hope that if you have some flexibility in when you can go, you'll go to a period of time where the bridge toll is slightly less. So the developer said that they can do that as well. So there is a pretty solid focus on traffic. And related to that interchange aspect is the plan is to have on Richards, as you're headed towards downtown Davis, before you get to the tunnel, 2 left turn lanes onto Olive, and Olive will be extended onto Nishi, and there'll be a new southern entrance point onto the university. So they're anticipating that a lot of that congestion and traffic that's currently fighting to get into the tunnel, and also just as you come out by the Borders intersection and turning left onto First Street, that will actually get channeled over to this new sort of Olive southern entrance into campus.
Which is like the citrus instead of the fuel thing to get rid of the grease.
A little bit, yeah.
Well, that's the point. I mean, instead of finding some big engineering solution that complicates the problem, what can we do to eliminate the cause of the problem in the first place?
Yeah.
Or mitigate it so that it becomes self-regulated so that more people come at off-peak times because they realize that it's more convenient for them.
Yeah. So the parcel is still not without its issues. One of the big concerns is its proximity to Interstate 80 and the air pollution from that.
Sure.
So they're currently working on ways to especially focus on the particulate air pollution. So that's been brought up as one of the challenges, and they acknowledged it, and they continue to work on trying to find ways to address that. So the progress and the hard work is not over on it, but to me, those 2 key infrastructure projects really made a big difference. In contrast, the cannery was all about the developer getting 3 yes votes. It was a split council. It was 3 votes yes, 2 votes no. I was one of the no votes. I just didn't think it was quite to the level that they were capable of, and also that we as a community would have benefited the most from. And so I really think there was a deal space there where I would have supported it, but again, their calculations were, let's just get the 3 votes, and they did. And then about a year and a half later, they came back and they asked for Mello-Roos fees to be tacked onto that as well, and I opposed that, and again, it was a split council, 3-2. And I think that's it is fairly disappointing to me, because I think it sets into motion something that we don't want. I think communities that feel like they're in it together are stronger and more cohesive, especially when you have issues with having to pass school bonds and parcel taxes to support the schools. What we're going to have there with the cannery folks is you're going to have people who pay essentially an additional $2,000 a year in Mello-Roos fees over and above what a neighbor across the way, a couple blocks away, would pay for the same home in terms of purchase price. And understandably, those people who are paying these additional taxes feel like they are not being treated equally or fairly. And if the past is any predictor of the future, they will probably be less likely to support some of these general community-wide parcel tax measures.
The problem with Mello-Roos CFD, so Community Funding Authority?
Community Financing District?
Okay. Anyway, the point is it's a sub-part of the city of Davis.
Yes.
And so when Mace Ranch and Wild Horse were built, they had the same problem. I'm not justifying it.
Sure.
I'm just saying it's one of the experiences of once you sign the contract and actually find out what it is that you've got, then you find out all the surprises.
Yes.
And Mello-Roos is a bad surprise if you're not expecting it.
So we have Mello-Roos fees or CFDs for most everyone has one or two, regardless of where they live. But most of them tend to be much smaller.
Sure.
So I could be off by a little bit, but the folks who live in Mace Ranch, they're probably, let's call it $600 to $800. I might be off by a smidge.
Compared to 2,000.
Yeah, compared to 2,000, or in the older parts of Davis where there might be something more along the lines of about $100 to $150 per year. And then we have the school CFDs, and that applies sort of universally throughout the city. But in terms of this patchwork CFD thing, yeah, they vary. It can be like kind of around $100-ish. But yeah, 2,000 is way beyond what used to be the highest amount.
Over $100 a month. I mean, on top of whatever you're paying for your mortgage,
yes.
whatever you're paying in terms of utilities, whatever you're paying on actually investing in your house to bring it up to what you dreamed of.
Yeah.
I mean,
so the buyers will sign a disclosure form, but if anyone has bought a house, it's one of those, probably remember where there's like the stack of documents this thick, and for whatever reason, magically, they have to be signed within the next 15 minutes. I find it seems like more than a coincidence that seems to be the experience of most of my friends who have purchased a home.
And
they just kind of just sign. Oh yeah, that's the Mello-Roos thing. Oh yeah, everybody in Davis pays Mello-Roos. Go ahead, sign that. Oh, and this one is to say that the title goes bad, then you won't sue us. Okay, sign. And you're just kind of sign, and then you're like, phew. And then you're proud homeowner, and then 6 months later when you're having a cup of coffee with your neighbors and somebody's going, wow, you guys pay those extra fees.
There was this person named Holly Bishop who'd bring those fees down to the council chambers and start screaming about them. So, I can't imagine that happening in Davis now. But anyway, enough about land use for now.
Sure.
The council considered the sugar tax and decided not to, the soda sugar tax.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, I feel like it's all self-evident. So can you explain for a couple of minutes what the idea was?
Yeah, so the idea is, so Berkeley recently passed a sugary beverage tax, sugar sweetened beverage tax, and it applies at the distributor level. So it doesn't actually occur at the retail transaction level. So for instance, if you buy Coca-Cola, for instance, most people buy it from a distributor and they'll either get a large delivery of actual pre-made, kind of in the can or in the bottle type of thing, or some restaurants do the big jugs of canisters of syrup. The tax is paid at the distributor level. So the local distributor would pay a tax of 1 penny per reconstituted ounce of the sugar sweetened beverage. So the retailer wouldn't have to do a whole lot of paperwork. I mean, one of the things that came up was like, oh, we can't support this. It's going to just be this administrative burden for the retailer. That's not true. It's done at the distributor's level. The idea was, Berkeley's approach was to tax it and use that tax to provide some information, provide some funds for some of the school garden programs and a variety of things like that, and then also directly or indirectly try to reduce consumption. So Yeah, so it had some appeal. It had some appeal to me personally because I think it's nice when taxes are avoidable, right? If they're a little bit more on the discretionary side. One of the things that people have talked to me about is the fact that they feel like Davis is fairly unaffordable. You know, they're struggling to make ends meet, and the prices keep going up. And you know, is Davis only going to be for the wealthy and successful? And so the idea of an additional tax, you know, that kind of hits everybody. Whereas if it's on a discretionary item, there's a little bit more flexibility. So if you don't want to pay that extra, you know, 12 cents of tax on your soda, well, you could do a diet soda, or you could do water, or you could go to Woodland if you're so inclined. If that's what, you know, sends you to Costco, then that's what sends you to Costco.
A discretionary decision.
And while not ideal, it's probably because what we were considering at the time was utility users tax. And so the thing about, like, we're pretty good on time. That's what's nice about your show, is we can actually talk about things in depth. It's important to place things in context. When we were talking about the sugar sweetened beverage tax, it was in context of we were evaluating perhaps a parcel tax. We were looking at a utility users tax, and you know, we were looking at sugar sweetened beverage tax. Utility users tax is fairly common in California. There are a couple hundred municipalities that tax utilities. So that could be your electric bill, that could be your water bill, that could be your cable bill, that could be your phone bill. And on average, it's about 5%. And that would have generated a fair amount of money. The thing about it is pretty much everybody uses electricity, and everybody uses you know, water, and everybody, you know, has trash collection. And so it's hard to escape that tax. So
this is the term you used at the beginning, which was avoidable.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I see where you are.
So if we, you know, add a 5% levy on terms of your electrical usage, or you know, cable, you know, subscription. Yeah, I mean, you know, is it you know, does it create a hardship? Probably not, but again, it kind of adds that overall expense of Davis. And if you're really kind of watching your pennies, you know, every little bit adds up. So this kind of had some appeal. It also had some appeal because there are very well documented health consequences of ingesting large amounts of sugar. And, you know, people, again, context is important. People are sort of like, well, this is ridiculous. This is the nanny state, you know, or you're gonna tax sugar. How come you don't tax sugar in my pie? And I actually had a slice of pie the other day, and it was delicious. And
do I hear Bob Dunning? Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, maybe. Yeah, I heard it from a variety of people.
Yeah.
Not just Bob Dunning, or reading it in Bob Dunning. The thing about it is, actually, the research has shown that this is probably the main source of sugar in people's diets for a very large proportion of people. And so it really is, you know, we need to be realistic. This is like one of the major sources of sugar in people's diet. Are we trying to stop it completely? No. But, you know, let's be honest, you know, eating a Fig Newton versus drinking a Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola is, or cola, let's not pick on Coke.
It may be the same amount of sugar in both of them.
Well, that's a lot of Fig Newtons.
That is a lot of Fig Newtons.
The thing about a sugar-sweetened beverage, in most cases, it's really just sugar and water.
So I got this out of a cartoon, but it was Beekman. I mean, it was the science guy.
Sure.
So if you throw a can of diet soda into a swimming pool, it'll float. If you throw a can of regular Coke into the swimming pool, it'll sink. The only difference is the sugar. That's how much sugar is in a can of Coke.
Okay. I'll have to try that sometime.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the specific gravity is so different that the reality is it goes, it's a lot heavier.
Yeah. So anyway, just kind of getting back to the health impacts of a sugar-sweetened beverage are actually much worse than sort of eating, you know, me eating a piece of pie. Even though there might be a similar amount of sugar, with the pie there are a variety of other constituents that tend to slow the absorption of the sugar, and there's also some nutritive value. So me eating an apple pie, there's some apples in there, there's some flour and some various other things. Whereas sugar-sweetened beverages just tend to be essentially just sugar and water. So having said that, the goal here was not to become a nanny state and just sort of, tell people not to drink soda. But, I drink soda every now and then. To me, it's a treat, and I can pay an extra 12 cents, or I guess now it's 16.9 cents or 20 cents, depending on the size of the soda. And, that's okay. The goal here is not to be a nanny state. But I think it's a very symbolic thing. If we would have had a soda tax, it, I think, would have sent a signal that, we recognize some of the negative health consequences, and coupled with this was the plan to use that money for children's health and recreation programs. So one of the things about the city budget is we have a parcel tax for parks. The parks parcel tax covers about a quarter of the cost of operating our parks. And so there is a need for additional funding for our parks and rec programs. And so the idea was that there would be sort of this nice benefit of the soda pop helping fund some children's nutrition programs and also recreation programs, and also cover some of the park expenses. Anyway, that's kind of a lot on the soda tax. But there was not support on the council for that. And I think ultimately, 10 years from now, we'll look back and wonder why it took us so long to put a tax on sugar-sweetened beverages.
Well, the calendar now is that the next chance we'll get will be the next time there's the city council race, which won't be for 2 years.
Right.
So maybe in the middle of your term, you can bring it back up.
Possibly, or at the state level. It's a little bit like the plastic bag ban.
Exactly.
The city did it a smidge ahead of the state, but,
We're having the conversation. We did it with smoking.
Yeah.
You wanted to talk about parking downtown.
Yeah. Yeah, so parking downtown is problematic, right? It's hard to find a spot. And that's kind of a good problem to have in some sense, right? Is the glass half full or half empty? People want to go downtown. There's things to do there. We have nice restaurants, we have interesting shops, there's stuff to do. It's not like you go to some smaller towns, just up the I-5 corridor or the Interstate 80 corridor, and the downtown there's plentiful parking because nobody wants to be there. They're all at these external, big box, sort of modern, sort of mall-ish sort of things. And so the fact that Davis has an intact downtown that people want to go to and spend time at, that's a good thing. I think, though, we've reached that point where people will want to go downtown and are being discouraged from going downtown because they worry about where are they going to park. And we had a parking task force that spent almost a year. There were, I want to say, 11 meetings. It might have been 12, but each meeting there was a sizable reading packet, a very good discussion, and we brought in outside experts on the issues of parking and parking management. That commission came up with something like 19 different recommendations, but one of the key recommendations, let me back up. The commission was composed of kind of a good cross-section of Davis in terms of some shopkeepers, some terms of some residents, and just a variety of people, just involved community members coming together and really trying to look into, find out more about the parking issues and come up with some solutions. And so we made use of a lot of the previous studies that had been done by both the downtown businesses and also the university and also the city, pulled them all together, and ultimately the task force came up with 18 or 19 recommendations. The key one was to have some paid parking in the core of downtown. And, this is kind of like the soda tax. If you look at it in isolation, you come up with one answer. If you look at it in the context of the real world that you're operating in, then you possibly come up with another. So when somebody's asked, hey, John, would you like to have to pay for parking? Well, no, of course not. Would I like to have to pay for a glass of water? Well, no, of course not. The context is we are adjacent to the university where the student enrollment is quite large. There are classes at all times of the day and all times during the week, and to park on campus costs $9. You can buy a quarter-long permit and it's slightly less, but if I just hopped in my car and went over there and tried to park somewhere, $9.
Or a ticket.
Or a ticket, yeah. If I'm not lucky that day or something. So downtown, we let people park essentially for free for 2 hours. So if I'm a student, have a 1-hour class on Thursday morning, maybe I'll go park downtown and just scoot to class and scoot back. And what's interesting, and people can try this if they're so interested in doing it, if you go to the Borders, I guess Whole Foods lot now, if you go and camp out at 9 o'clock in the morning and watch people park there and take a tally of which direction they walk. Are they walking to go to Whole Foods or the Gap, or are they walking towards campus? And you'll discover in many areas of our downtown, a lot of people are headed towards campus. And then we also have the situation where we have employees who are going to be downtown for 6+ hours. They'll park and then they'll just move their car and then move their car again, and there's no real incentive for them to go park a little further away. So the idea of paid parking is really about management. And this is a very important point. The reason for paid parking is to manage the supply, not so that the city gets revenue. And the idea is in some areas, let's call it, just for instance, 2nd Street and 3rd Street between D and G, you might have parking meters. And what you would do is at the parking structure at 4th and G, you allow 8 hours for free or some extremely reduced rate. So the employees would preferentially go park there. So there would still be plenty of free parking. 4th and G, the garage, we had talked about making it free parking, and a little further beyond 5th Street, everything would be free. But this sort of downtown is meters. And this is why the parking revenue piece is very important. That's not a primary consideration. The goal here is to have the employees park a little further away, and students go park on campus. The university has built lots of nice parking structures for students, and the fact that they're parking in our downtown, taking up spaces away from people who actually want to come downtown and shop and eat, that's not a good thing. Have them go onto campus. The parking meters of today are not the parking meters of yesterday. They will take money, they'll take credit cards, and they will take these sort of magnetic stripe cards. The reason that's important is that I don't know if you ever shopped at the downtown Macy's in Sacramento, but you could validate your parking. So you'd go, you'd get your little thing, and then you realize, wait, if I buy something, my parking is free. If I don't, then I have to pay a couple dollars. And then you go and buy a muffin or something or a bagel. And you're like, can you validate this? And they validate it, and you go, and you have gotten to park there for free. We can do a similar sort of program, and we could do it in a smarter sort of way. So we could partner with the Davis Downtown Business Association, and every shop would be linked. And if you spend $100 a month or a quarter or some number, it would know, your card would know that, and when you go to pay for your parking, instead of 50 cents an hour, maybe it's free, first hour free, or first hour free and then 25 cents an hour after that. But the idea would be this could be used to help increase business for the businesses downtown. And for somebody like me who, okay, I went to Blaze Pizza and had a pizza with my son and, spent a little money, I might think, oh wait, if I spend an extra $15 this month, next month I can park for free. And so there's this incentive, and then it gets me to go downtown, and it's kind of this win-win situation. I kind of hate that term, but it really is. It helps the shopkeepers there, it helps me to support my downtown, and it also makes it easier for me to park, because even though more people are going to want to go downtown to shop and do things, we have freed up a lot of these prime spaces by scooting the students and the employees out of that section. So when I want to go, I can go and park in a much closer proximity to where I want to go. So it's much more convenient for me.
Good.
So that's downtown parking.
We ended on a very cosmic level. The next time you're downtown, think about the parking. I'm sure you will. The parking will remind you that it's crowded. Lots of things to talk about. Thanks for being on the show.
Oh, sure.
Good luck on your election.
Okay.
This is what's going on. Thanks for watching. Good evening.